Okay, good morning, everyone. And I see there's quite a lot of you here. Good morning, and thank you, VST, for inviting me and inviting IBM to grace, this session on smarter business and a smarter world with that theme. So what I'm going to do is really talk about a perspective on our future with the data and AI moving forward. So if I may just, hello to those saying hello. So if I may just ask them to share and open my chart. All right. So this is what I'd like to share with you for maybe the next half hour or so. And I understand, we can probably accommodate some questions as we move on later on. So yeah, if you go to the next one, okay, so it's really this context on data and what can we get from the business insights, no? So first of all, if you see here, I just wanted everyone to take a moment to really see what is the scale of the data that we're actually generating, okay, online here. Right? So you see many of these, you can read them yourself. In terms of the scale, this is how much we produce daily, at least from 2020. It's not invented by me. You actually see the source there, right? So it's quite a lot, you can see, right? Question is, what do we do with this data and how do we harness the real power of this data? Moving on, right? If you look at what insights, okay, are these all, what kinds of data? Let's look at the next one and look at what is the wealth of the insights that we can get from here. We go to the next one. What kinds of data is actually, where is this coming from? So many of the types of data beyond what we put online, you and me as a consumer, and those that are coming from our data centers. Many of that, the massive amounts have also increased because, for instance, sensors from both machines and our own sensors, the ones that we wear, like your own, watch, whether it's an Apple Watch or whatnot, right? Sensors for anything is coming through, right? We are also seeing lots of data coming from weather, generated from sensors. That even your phone and other items are really sensors for weather and climate data, right? What else? You are also seeing that you can see even from appliances, from images that we post, the content, all of that are sources for our data, right? Sorry, let me just pause here. My audio okay? You hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Great.
All right. Okay. So let me continue on. So of course, there's a lot of social data. You saw the chart earlier, transactional data. Okay. Let me just get it grounded for transactional data. Before 2019, transactional data was probably, much more of those that many of us here are from IT, we store it in our servers and whatnot, right? The data that are stored by the banks. But in the last 18 months, the transactional data that we produced in the Philippines was a lot more related to e-commerce, right? We can see that. And of course, a lot coming from internet and, no need to mention all the apps, right? You and me, I would say easily, many of us would probably have downloaded 10 new apps on our phones, if you're using a smartphone in the last 18 months, meaning during the height of the pandemic. So, it's a lot, right? Again, the question is, what do we do with this, right? If I go to the next one, let's look at how has COVID also changed the impact in terms of consumer behavior, and you'll see here some of the sources. I'm just getting it grounded from global to now Philippines, right? The other way to look at this chart is like, did you know that? Okay, so did you know that we're now the 7th top global fastest growing e-commerce market, right? Maybe not new news to you. We've all gone there, right? You've seen the BSP also beef up a lot on, the e-payments. They just want to do that because they just want to come up with new policies and so on. No, because they're seeing the increase. We're not talking triple digit increase. We're talking about 5,000% increase. Did you know that for e-payments? We're talking if you buy something in Lazada, you buy something in Shopee, you buy something from Under Armour or whichever site, or you subscribe to Netflix or to your internet providers, right? It's the age of contactless payments, right? And then you look at the digital transactions, right? This is Philippines, okay? We're generating $15 billion, okay, of the digital transactions. Actually, I'd say even the retail transactions are really even higher than 25%. And then tax payments, I think this is even going to be higher, right? As we can see more and more of the government entities, the public sector, the LGU levels are going to accept more of that, right? And of course, even for baka sabihin nyo, legit pay my, there are many others, right? But I just wanted to put into context that it's now here, okay? All of us as consumers are really seeing already the data explosion and the digital behavior that's happening in front of us. So how do you view this? So you look at the next one, right? I would say it's like looking at an open sea, okay? Think like you're in an island, okay? So this is one picture that shows how it's like, right? It's like it's open sea, it's all data out there. That's like the water, okay? There's a lot of data available, right? But do you understand all the data? You look at the lower line, do we understand even this data, right? So the thing is, there is a gap, right? There's a gap between what is understood data and what is available data. So, for lack of better term, it's like it's the gap of not knowing, okay? So how do we then look at it as a business, right? So our goal should be to really minimize the gap of not knowing. You want to increase the possibility of what is understood data if you go to the next one, right? So you want to increase that understood data by being able to process. So maybe your question is, how am I going to do it, right? So, but you have to first be aware that this is really all available there, and you need to understand where's that data. Don't move it first, just understand where the data is. So we go to the next one. We realize then that our new currency, okay, whether it's dollar, peso, you name it, whatever is the currency, right? That is now our new currency. So data is our new currency. If you're still thinking, you can ignore the data, well, I guess we're sort of wrong there, right? In a way, we have to have this mindset that every company now must be a data company, okay? I'm not saying you change your name and all that. What I mean is, if this is going to be our new currency, we all need to understand, regardless of industry, what are we going to do with this data, right? And this is where the concept of, the analytics on the data, if you go to the next one, okay, comes in, right? So what really is that? You want to have first, data can be very complex, and if it's very complex, maybe the value isn't there as much, but you need to make sense out of that data. You want to go from having a foundation of what is information to you, okay? So when you have an information foundation, okay, that's your starting point. You know that data is somehow clean, somehow it's standardized, and more importantly, accessible. Let me just stay with this accessible, okay? If you're a company today, many of the problems we see around us is that it's good, it's accessible, but it's only accessible to the IT department or only to finance, right? The true power of getting the ability to harness this power of the data is when it becomes what we call democratized. It's accessible throughout the enterprise. Meaning if I have less skill or I have more skill, medyo at least I can look at the data, right? But if I have to rely on 10 people to tell me what the data is, and I can close my ledger only after 20 45 days, right, and look at how a product or an offering is doing, that's not democratizing it, right? So we want to get to the point where it is that, right? Your data may not be forever clean, but you got to start anyway, right? And then the next part of that is this is like your ladder from the analytics going to the AI, right? So you want to understand what has happened to that, and that's where you get a lot of the reporting, and that many are trying this reporting, right? Which is good, right? But similar to like COVID, how did I, or somebody get infected? It's like the concept of diagnostic analytics, right? Why did that happen? Why did the e-payments all of a sudden go up? Why did the cybersecurity threat go up in which area and how, right? Is it because we're working from home, and so on, right? So you want to understand, you want to go from have the base of the data to the what's there, okay? And understanding why the data is such. And then in predictive, right, you want to start looking at statistical models, right, to predict what likely could happen given this, data points and the scenarios, right? This is also the reason why if you look at, analytics type environments, right? Some ask me, what are foundational skills or who are the right people who need to be there? All of a sudden, it becomes a hot skill if you're very good in math and statistics. And this is part of the reason why. It actually uses that in the predictive modeling and analytics, right? And then you get to the point where you want to be prescriptive. What could be the NBA? Not NBA as in basketball, but what could be the next best action in time, right? So think about it as that's the layer, right? And that's what it starts to bridge to cognitive AI. Cognitive because it starts to learn and it gets better as you go higher up, okay? And if we go also the ladder concept, and I'm just trying to take, time to explain this so that we all get grounded, right? Into the ladder for AI, artificial intelligence, right? You go to the next one, right? It will show you the prescriptive approach into this journey. In IBM, would like to see, and there is an ebook about this, if you want to see the ebook, we can share it with you. One of the authors of the ebook on the AI ladder is an ex-IBM, he's an IBM executive still with us today, but it's really simplifying the concept there, okay? What is it, right? If you want to get to the journey to artificial intelligence and see the true power of that, you want to be able to collect all the data, okay? But make it very, very simple, right? Make it simple and, like I shared earlier, accessible, okay? The next part of it is you're gonna organize that data, okay, into whatever is required by the business, okay? But that becomes your foundation. Very simple. You collect, you organize, okay? So like, think about a very, messy room with all your clothes, all thrown all over the room. Okay, all the clothes are there, but you gotta organize them, put the storage, and then you start to analyze, right? But as you analyze, you start to realize you need to scale, okay? But do not forget that as you scale, you wanna scale with trust and transparency. So what are we talking about? You wanna trust the data that's being pushed onto you, and you want to be transparent. You will see some of those concepts coming to life later, right? So when we say trust, right, because sometimes maybe the data is not clean, right? When we say trust, how do you trust something? It's substantiated by facts, by proof points. So when somebody tells you this is the insight, okay, you lost you lost profit margin of 10% because your seller is not good or the price is not good. So what's your question? Why? Why, right? So you want to analyze. So you want to be substantiated with facts that tell you why is it such. So in AI, it gives you confidence. Why? Because you can even go to a percentage level of confidence, right? It will tell you. So if it is not able to give you proof, then fake news yun. Okay? So in AI, it needs to be explainable, needs to be trusted, and it needs to be transparent. So when it's accessible, it's transparent. It's not just because somebody says so, right? And then finally, you want to infuse and operationalize it again all across the enterprise. So in true fashion, when you get into this ladder, right, when you infuse it, it sort of also becomes addictive in a way, because it becomes usable now to as many people as possible. Some may have less skills than others, but it becomes usable for everyone. And of course, you can now modernize your platforms to do that. The modernize is important because as we process all this data, do not think for a moment that it's also easy to do. You want to make sure you have the compute capacity, you have the right memory, and so on. The goodness is a lot of this from an infrastructure are getting much and much more affordable and acceptable. This is the reason also why, for example, in IBM, you're probably, if you look at the news, why are we in quantum computing? It's one of the highest form or the supercomputer level, right? We needed the scale to help, for instance, COVID. Okay, in COVID, if you want to understand the formulation for vaccines, right? You need to look at all the scenarios and the modeling as to how to put the components together. Do you think that somebody has given that compute power and it's somewhere in their house? No, you need compute capacity to do that. You need the ability to run all the algorithms for all this, right? So somebody's got to do it somewhere. That's part of modernizing it, because otherwise it will take you forever to run the modeling, right? So now we're happy to see, at the start of the pandemics, we shared all our patents, so that all the pharma and whoever wants to develop it can take a look at that and use capacity, right? So that you can find cures faster. I'm just giving examples of how modernizing infrastructure also allows you to look at data and make it really usable, right? So if we go to the next one, what then are AI systems, right? So artificial intelligence is actually the partnership between, human and the machine, right? So partnership between the human and machine, right? It depends on what humans are really good at. If you look at that, and we want to see humans are inherently capable of set of skills that will help us learn, discover, and make decisions, So we want to see also the ability for the machine to do more of that more often, right? All right. So if you look at this, this is showing where, what are the things that are, humans and, a machine would be good at, right? So you look at that if you click, right? So yeah, we look at, we probably have also common sense, morals, and reason, through the dilemmas, right? So this is what, we do, right? We can also dream up of new ideas, make all the generalizations, given clues and pieces of information we have. But sometimes we're also restricted by our ability to learn and learn faster, do it more, okay? And understand, it could take more time, right? So some people think, if I use AI, it replaces the person, okay? In some fora, I've given a very, very simplistic example. Does it mean that if you use your phone na ngayon, not the calculator, okay, to compute 3 digits multiplied by another 3 digits, it means you don't know how to do multiplication? As a human person, it's not. It's just that you can do it faster. If I ask you to do 10 of that in a minute, if I ask you to do your editing, it doesn't mean you cannot write on a piece of paper and compose. right? But you use a computer because it's easier to edit. So let's think of AI as really augmenting what we do. So we as humans, we excel on the left part. You see that. The common sense, I hope you all have common sense, morals, our ability to imagine, you know, and then we're given abstract things, but we can make sense out of that, right? We can dream. The machine is not that good, you know, maybe some can, but you know, that's where we excel. In AI systems, you can ask them to find knowledge wherever, right? Okay, I'll give an example. Our Watson platform, you can ask to load data and make it read, say, 2,000 documents, you know, and keep feeding it. And by the way, all the 2,000 documents it read in 1 hour, it will remember everything that it read, it will organize it, and it will understand. Now think about a human person. Can I ask you to read 2,000 documents and by the way, remember all the 2,000? We'll be lucky if we did, right? So let's think about that and let's see when both of them get infused and we see the power of, you know, what actually we can possibly deliver, right? So now we then look at, so I just come back to this, right? So we then, you know, get the two to merge, right? And we look at the power of that, okay? And then you see the two coming together, okay? And now we look at where then can you infuse AI in terms of operations? There are many ways. So let's look at it from a persona perspective. If you're IT today, on the right side, you can see it possibly being infused for IT operations. If you're a CFO, you look at the bottom, right? You can do it in financial operations today. As an example, in IBM, for instance, our people in finance and operations, my CFO among others, they do their own dashboards now. They do their own, you know, AI with data that is, whether it's in SAP, it's, you know, sales data, it's data about opportunities, data about historical, etc. And they're creating it, and you know, they can do it on their own, right? Even the controller, even some of the others, they're not relying now on full, you know, stream of IT people because it's now in their hands. That, remember, the accessibility, the ability to do that. Same for business operations, of course, for customer service, right? Maybe some of you will agree with me that when you interact online, some of the sites that you work with, when you try to chat, you actually don't know anymore whether you're chatting with you know, on the online chat. If one's behind that, the one behind that is actually a person, a chatbot that is powered by automation or even AI, right? Madali lang, okay? You can ask in natural language, the true AI, right? In natural language, you can literally ask a question. What do you think is, you know, this? How can I do this? Hindi yung parang, you know, just search words, right? And then it will give you the answers. It will ask you to do thumbs up, thumbs down, right? If you're not happy with that, they love it because the system learns from you. The more you ask, the better it gets, right? And it will give you confidence. It will even say how much more confident the AI chatbot is with the answer. If it's not a true chatbot based on AI, it's probably an encoded Q&A behind it. Okay, so not that it's wrong, it's also online, it's starting it, but I'm just saying if you really infuse it that way, that means you can answer more of those questions. So I'll now start to go into examples as we move along. So AI for IT operations, okay, you can now, if you're looking at too many incidents in a day, in an hour, you know, and you want to be able to take a leave, okay, let's say you're running operations, you can actually use AI for your IT operations and look at just telling you when to alert you for any anomalies, because it looks at, you know, patterns and look at history, what are the events and tickets, and then even for security, if somebody's trying to do what they're not supposed to do, right? So for instance, and you've seen virtualized environments earlier with the speakers, right? So in those environments, as you go and deal with thousands of VMs, for example, right? And you have only one system administrator, it's actually going to be tough, right? So looking at all those faults, even when you're asleep, that's when, this becomes very, very, very helpful, right? What else? Closer to home, right? Closer to home. This is with the Jollibee Group Foundation. So, when we enjoy, our burgers with all the vegetables that come to that, right? We're actually, with the Jollibee Foundation, we're actually helping their farmers get this to us, right? It's using data about the weather, and then when sensors using part of our data with the weather company, and expanding it to a 15-day work forecast to actually do it in a very accurate way, so that it can actually increase crop yield, and then more farmers can actually give us the better quality of the vegetables, right? So these are insights that we actually get from them. There's more, no? They're doing this already in Nueva Ecija, and then expanding with some other areas. For Energy Development Corporation, by the way, so with the weather, which is the now, and then the climate data, which is more longer term, when you put it together, we've actually expanded it to also giving you a platform eventually, that not being used currently by the Jollibee Group Foundation, but in IBM we have now the Environment Intelligence Suite that allows you to do even carbon capture, right? So why we're doing that? Because it's all again about the data, all about providing a data science platform, so you don't have to build it yourself. This is another one from energy company. This is Energy Development Corporation. This is, for those of you who may not know, they're in renewable energy, primarily geothermal, right? Their biggest one is in Leyte, right? They're also using hyper-localized data about the weather to do operational decisions. What are operational decisions? Because they deal with hazards, right? So you're dealing with people's lives, you're dealing with also the ability to sustain power. You want to make sure you want to make decisions ahead, whether depending on the weather, that kind of data, and working with all the different sensors, is there supposed to be unplanned shutdown, and are there imminent hazards, right? So you want to process more and more of data that comes from the sensors, and augment what is with the what people are already using there, right? And even if nandun sa probinsya, you can actually use it even from Manila and monitor, right? Of course, there are some other international examples for this. Now, looking at using also AI to process what? Like in Credit Mutual, 300, look at this, 350,000 of emails per day, right? And then getting faster response, trying to parse it, looking at that, because for them, that's what's more important, right? What else? This is again also another example on predictive maintenance, okay? What is KONE? This is, for elevators, right? So they process, they have many millions of elevators around the world, right? So how do you look at real-time information, and then remotely, right? So, remember what I mentioned about AI. It's about scale. It's about scale. It's not because you don't know how to do it. It's about how much of that you can do in a shorter span of time, and look at patterns, and what are the possibilities. This is an example from Australia, right? Because in one part, I think melanoma was a challenge for them, and really they wanted to look at, remember, diagnostic, right? So looking at many of the different data points, okay, based on, believe it or not, on skin moles, right? Color, the irregularity, looking at that, nunal, okay? So looking at the imagery, right? And then it starts to score, and then putting in accuracy. But there's still a doctor behind it. It's not replacing the doctor, but giving the doctor all the data points, right? So that you get it actually is up to the level of 90% accuracy, right? So think about it as your second set of eyes, right? What else, right? We've probably heard about smaller examples, but it now can power a ship. Okay, so you have some cameras, you have onboard sensors, and then you have devices there, right? There's no one on board, no one on board. So this is true possibility. So why is that possible? I just give you some few examples, but we've had a long history in IBM of about over 70 years of this research, all across and processing it, and really AI is close to our hearts. It happens to be used also in conjunction with our hybrid cloud model. But in 1997, those of you who may have remembered, right? That was the that's the baby version of our AI. That's where was the earlier version for Watson. We beat the human person Kasparov in chess, and then in the game, as in the TV game Jeopardy in 2011, right? How did we beat that? It's because we fed it with a lot of the data that it had to read, like person would have to read and try to understand, but it had to understand the questions because you can't predict what's going to be asked. So it was a participant in that. But from then on, the learnings that we found from there became applied to many, many different industries. And in 2019, IBM started to develop the platform to be able to debate, okay, to take two different sides, right, based on, again, what is ingested information and try to reason, okay? So technically now, so you would put it up in the news, right? It can now argue. Why argue? Because you can now, remember I mentioned about truth and transparency. If I say yes or no, it's because I gave it data points, right? So I wanted you to get that appreciation of how it actually it is starting to evolve. And before I'm starting to get to the end, but really, as we go and move forward, I want to stress the point. If you want to use AI for good, it needs to be trustworthy. Okay, there is ethics in doing AI. So successful, AI ethics, it needs to be fundamentally sound. Like I mentioned, it's accessible. It's not only with one who controls it. It's very inclusive, right? And you want to make sure that if it's not doable, you can flip flop it, but it will still give you the data that your insights are showing you. I will end with this concept for everyone here, right? Post-pandemic, as we're starting to go from pandemic to endemic, right? It's important that we have very, very clear priorities, right? So, we think about the purpose of what we want to use our data for, leverage on technology, okay, and make sure we're knowledgeable about regulation so that it shapes our priorities. The left side, in terms of advantages, right? This one, our essentials today, leadership. While we now have technology, very strong technology that allows us to differentiate, let's not forget that leaders need to practice mindful leadership, right? It's not because technology is there we all go away, right? So we have to make sure we are still there, and we are of course engaging our employees. It's a very different way that we now manage, right? And it's all about partnering also. Let's forget the concept of everyone competing with everyone. Forget it, okay? It's now open innovation, right? The question is, how do we come together? You've seen this, very simple examples on the vaccines, right? Even from Philippines, right? We've seen partnering across everybody for us to all get the vaccines. That's a preview, right? And then whatever it is we do, let's make sure security is there by design as part of the foundation. And yes, you will have to, of course, know essentially, for you, right? What really would be your focus? You're dealing with customers, whatever is the product, it's operations focus. That will determine also where your budget, for example, will go, right? Because that determines your purpose and it allows you to move forward better.